Erev Tov, everyone. The Torah mentions certain species of animals that are kosher. So some are kosher for a korban. Those that are kosher for a korban, we brought as a sacrifice, are certainly kosher to be eaten because the korbanos were eaten. And then there were other animals that were not the korban, but nevertheless were kosher to eat, that the Torah mentions. So in this week's parsha, the Torah mentions tzvi and ayal as two species of animals that are not brought as a korban, but nevertheless are kosher animals, and that they can be eaten. So loosely translated, it's the family of the deer, and it's the family of the rams, of the big sheep. The Torah, the korbanos, the Torah says, shor o chesef oez ki volei. The three species are shor, which are bovines, bulls, and kesef, keves, sheep, and oez are goats, easy. So they're kosher species. So we have a rule by animals that if it chews its cud and its hooves are split, then we consider it to be a kosher animal. Now, over the long run of Jewish exile, there are many animals that are not found in the land of Israel, or not even in the Middle East, that are found in different parts of the world, and that apparently have these physical traits that would make them kosher for consumption. And the question has always arisen in the poskim from the 5th century onwards, when you encounter these different types of animals. So we mentioned that when it came to birds, it had to have a Masorah. It had to have a tradition that this bird was kosher. But by animals, is that true as well? Because of the fact that there are many animals that fit into the category of having split hooves and are able to regurgitate their food, but they don't exist in the land of Israel. And they are not mentioned neither as a korban nor as a food that could be eaten. So I think in the last century, for instance, there were the shaila arose about the American buffalo, which is not a buffalo, it's a bison. The African buffalo is a real buffalo. But the shaila is about the African buffalo as well. how can you eat buffalo meat? Jews came to South Africa in the middle of the 19th century, especially from Lithuania. There were no buffaloes in Lithuania. Many of them were peddlers, or they were people that had small shops in small towns, especially in mining towns. And there, the natives ate buffalo. Not only that, the natives ate giraffe. So the Shaila arose as this giraffe, a kosher animal, because again, it has the physical traits of having split hooves and of regurgitating its food. So the Shaila regarding the giraffes, the poskim said the giraffe is undoubtedly a kosher animal. But since it has such a long neck, it's not possible for us to identify where the Mokum HaShchita should be, where the Veshet, the esophagus, and the Kone, the trachea, converge close to each other to be able to shecht it. And therefore, the giraffes never really entered the menu of the Jewish people. Someone pointed out to me before, I know the people that are involved, that once a year, these two people run a dinner of exotic foods, and they serve giraffe meat. Having never attended the dinner, I cannot say how it tastes, etc. But there's no limit to what human beings can eat or will eat. So that was an issue. The American bison, the buffalo, so there were millions of them in America in the middle of the 19th century. Tremendous herds. And as the population of America grew, the immigrants came, America doubled and tripled its population every decade. And the push westwards was intense. And the buffalo, which was the basic food of the American Indian, of the local people, was hunted for its meat and for its hide and for everything else that goes with animals. So that by 1950, the animal was almost extinct on the North American continent. I believe that, if I recall correctly, there were about 350 left out of millions. And the government then decided that it wanted to preserve the American bison. So it made it illegal to hunt it, and it created protected ranges so that by 1980, from 50 years, the bisons were now hundreds of thousands. You can see them today, especially if you go to Yellowstone Park, tremendous herds of the bisons. When I was in the OU, there was a Jew that had a brilliant idea that what the American Jew needed was meat from the buffalo, from the bison. And he was going to open a packing house and develop shochtim who would be able to slaughter the bison correctly and that it would be served. He did so. Such a thing existed for about 5 years. It never really caught on. At the beginning, it caught on because of the novelty. So there were kosher restaurants that advertised that they have buffalo meat. But nobody ever came back for seconds. And the whole thing pretty much died out. But all the posts can discuss, here was what is it? Is it a new species? Is it part of the same species like bulls and cows? And it has the simone kashrus, but there certainly is no tradition. There's no history of it ever being used. And it never existed even in the parts of the world where the Jews originally came from the Middle East. So these types of shilas continue to exist as we discover new things. For a long period of time, there was a question about a fish called a sturgeon. And the eggs of the sturgeon is what you made caviar out of. And this was the delicacy of kings. It was produced in Iran and marketed in Russia. And the Russian Rabbonim all had chuvas on it, whether or not it's mutter to eat this caviar. For a long period of time, the machlokas existed. Over the last 50 years, it's died out. No one eats sturgeon anymore. And no one, the kosher caviar on the market is not from sturgeon. It's like many things, it's a man-made product. It's just a copy of something. But these were all shilas that existed, real shilas. And you were at a time when food was not as abundant as now. So one of the Rishonim, I forget which one, I don't want to be misquoted, God forbid, discussed why the Chazal never discuss vegetarianism. Are they for it or are they against it? If Cook has a whole essay on why we should support being a vegetarian. Mr. Mendelowitz from Torah V'Das commented, he said, but at the end of the day, you can't make tefillin out of spinach. But that's a shilah. And so one of the Rishonim commented, he said, because in their time and in their clime, you had nothing to eat. What do you mean? You're not going to be a vegetarian. You die of hunger. And therefore, it was not an actual shilah. And Chazal and the poskim only discuss actual shilas. Therefore, we don't find the question of vegetarianism arising in halacha until pretty much our time, till the 19th and 20th centuries, when food already became much more abundant, and therefore there was a greater variety. Rabbi Chananya ben Akash Omer Tzakar Yivorchu Tzakar Sis Yisrael לפיכך חירבו להם תורה ומצוות שנאמר, אדוני חווה סימן צדקו יגדיל תורה ליד.